Good Lord, that is sealed. I haven't experienced that much this year. Alright, hey, welcome back to the channel, everybody. If this is your first time tuning in, please subscribe. If you hit the bell, you will receive notifications of future videos. Over here at Hive number 3 for a weekly inspection. Honestly, I can't really remember too much how they did last week. I do know maybe the week prior I removed some frames of swarm cells and put them into Hive number 5 to get them queen right. But overall, I would not have, well, let me back up. I would not have done that if I didn't find the queen. So, given the time of year, swarm season and everything, really checking for the queen. If I can cage her, I will, and then I'll move through the rest of the colony pretty quickly. Just periodically checking the frames to see how the queen's laying, but more so checking for swarm cells. And if I'm able to cage the queen, so I know they have a queen 100%, I can tear down any swarm cells I might find. Other than that, I'm just going to take a peek into the honey super to see how they're doing. And as you can tell, or maybe it's your first time watching, this colony, a few of the colonies actually, had a second deep acting as a honey super, but because this hive swarmed at a pretty inopportune time, like right as spring was getting going, it really offset or really pushed back the progress of this hive by about 6 weeks. So if you don't know this or not, it takes about 6 weeks for a colony to get going again after they swarm because of the time frames it takes to develop a queen, for those eggs to be laid, well, for her to mate, come back, eggs to be laid. The worker bees take about 3 weeks, 21 days to hatch. So all in all, it's about a 6-week gap in progress. But nonetheless, they did requeen themselves. She did return, mated, and was laying eggs. So they did rebound. I'm just curious to see at this time, or this year I guess, if they rebounded with enough time to capitalize on the rest of the nectar flow so I can harvest some honey from them. So, like usual, enough of me yapping, gave them some smoke. So let's get into the colony and see how they're doing. Let's see, probably, if I don't put that there, I'll put it there. Well, if you can make any kind of judgment by a first peek, they're not doing too bad. There is quite a few frames of some pretty nice looking wax. Got pretty silent because I was thinking to myself, if I really want to remove one, yeah, sure. It's pretty light actually, but look at all that beautiful nectar. And I'll give you another peek now that a frame's moved out of the way, so you can see that frame's looking pretty good, and so is that. So they're doing their part. Let me put this back and get the spacing again. This thing's pretty useful. The first few years I ran 10 frames in the supers and decided to run a 9 frame this year because you can actually harvest more honey. In a 9 frame, the bees will build out each frame a little thicker, which allows them to store just a little more honey per frame. So instead of 3 pounds per frame, they might be able to store maybe 3.5 pounds per frame. But that half pound over 9 frames, you know, that's another 4 pounds of honey. Alright. Actually, I'll take a tip from a few folks I've been watching to check the queen excluder for the queen. I don't see her on there. So this, thinking of a few things. This deep has quite a few frames of empty, well, bare foundation. And then this frame is falling apart. So one of the other goals or possibilities to removing the deep super, because it has all nicely drawn out frames, is I'm going to switch or swap some of those frames with some of these frames that aren't drawn out at all, which should give the queen plenty of space to start laying more eggs in. It's a nice looking brood frame. Looking at eggs, a whole bunch of capped brood, some pupated larvae throughout. This is frame number 3. Some nice capped brood there. But yeah, this queen's, she's doing a good job. I think by giving her a few frames, a few drawn frames from what was being used as a super, it should give her an instant boost in real estate so she can start laying some more eggs throughout the colony. And it'll save a lot of the bees the effort from having to draw out wax to create brand new, to create new areas for the queen to lay in. Looking at some new bees that just got done hatching. They're very dusty colored. And let's see what we have here. That's just a queen cup. There's nothing in it. If I can find this queen, I'd be pretty happy. And that last frame, it looks like by moving a few frames of drawn wax in here, it'll help them out too, because the queen's laying in pretty much any open space, which on that frame was scattered throughout and around pollen. I remember this queen from last week or the week before. She was pretty difficult to find. I actually had to close up this colony and come back to them later, let them settle down, and then when I came back to look for the queen again, I was able to find her. Yeah, there's eggs throughout there. There's a bee. You can see that. Hopefully it's on camera. There's a bee hatching right there. And yeah, there's eggs throughout. So they're doing good. The queen's definitely laying away. And I'm thinking if she had a little more space to lay in, that would help her out as well. Considering all the moving around I'm about to do, I would really like to find her so I can cage her. And then I can move around a little more freely and not worry about possibly rolling her or squishing her with a frame. But I don't know. Looks like I might not find her this time. Again. Alright, so it looks like I need 5 frames because the rest of these really don't have anything going on. Alright, so she's definitely not on here, so I can set that aside. She's not on there. Set that aside. And she's not on here. So I can set that aside. Alright, so that's 3 from the far left side, and I'll try and put them back where I found them. So really I just need to get to this deep here. Or I might just use this one here. Really doesn't matter. Okay, so not so much on that one. Trying to make some space here so I can get to the bottom of the deep. Just want to find a few frames that have been robbed out enough so I can provide the queen more space to start laying in. Yeah, the deeps have been off the hives for a few days now. Thought they'd be a little further along as far as being robbed out. But honestly, if I'm moving them into the last few frames, they usually act as food stores anyway. So maybe it'll give them a boost in food, which is good. And then maybe they'll move some resources around. Give the queen some space to lay in. There we go. Yeah. That's a nice light frame. So maybe that'll work. If I can find one more that's light. It's light enough. Put that more so towards the center. Alright, those three. Let's give them some smoke real quick. I'm behind the camera right now. I have another deep over here. That's a possibility. I'm just going to check on a few frames. See, that's a better. Let's see, that's a better option right here. Let's set that back. I'm starting to get frames everywhere. Let's see. So I got two more options. I got two frames to put back. So I'm going to try and find two frames from the deep that's behind the camera to serve the same purpose, to give this queen more space to lay in. And here's one. That's nice, open cells, no food or anything. So if I can find one more. That should work okay. Alright, so part of my plan is working out with having removed the deep supers, letting the bees rob them out, and then providing some of the colonies that need it some better frames that are drawn out versus, you know, stuff like this. Alright, so that's it for hive number 3. No queen. Managed to find enough eggs to feel good about it. Let's see. Put the super back on, which is actually looking pretty nice. And call it a day. Alright, that's it for hive number 3. So removing the deeps, like I said, did me good. I allowed the bees to rob them out for a few days. They freed up some space, removed the food stores, the nectar, and probably some pollen. from some of the frames, which allowed me to, again, remove frames like this that aren't really doing the hive or the colony any justice this time of year, considering I'm running them as single deep brood chambers. So for hive number 3, I was able to swap out 5 frames with a drawn comb, so that should give the queen an instant boost in space to lay in. So it'll be nice over the next few weeks to see how she maximizes that space, and if, you know, if my idea actually works out the way I think it will, or hope it will. Alright, so that's it. Cole's Farm, May 18th. Somewhat beautiful Monday, minus the overcast weather, but it's actually keeping it pretty nice out here. Alright, check us out on Facebook and Instagram if you haven't done so. Please subscribe, and again, if you hit the bell, you'll receive notifications of future videos. And somewhat of a newer tradition, I guess. Let's take a look at the front entrance, and that is typically what it looks like after an inspection. The bees are trying to get away from me. They don't have too many places to go, so they congregate on the front entrance and the landing board there. Alright, check us out next week for another weekly inspection of hive number 3.